Hi, I'm Heather. I'm a hypnotherapist, and I've made this video so that you can understand a bit about how the mind works, why we can sometimes react in unhelpful ways, and how those reactions are just a normal part of being a human. And there's really simple things that we can do to help us to feel better. So, to start with, I'm going to show you a picture of the brain so that you can see what I'm talking about. We'll start with the bit that you know as you, the prefrontal cortex at the front of the brain. It's the conscious part, the intellectual part, the logical part that interacts with the world. It's attached to the cerebral cortex, a vast intellectual resource library, kind of like a computer database, and this is the subconscious part of the intellectual mind. Now, when we're working from this intellectual part of the brain, we generally get things right. It will always come up with solutions and answers based on a rational assessment of the situation, and it's generally positive. There is another part of the brain. This is the original primitive part, the subconscious part. It's part of the limbic system and runs all the autonomic processes in the body, such as your heart beating and your breathing. It's the emotional part, and its priority is always our safety and survival. The central and most influential bit of the primitive mind is the amygdala. So you may have heard of this. It's the fight, flight, freeze area of the brain. It works closely with two other very primitive parts. There's the hippocampus, which holds all our primitive and sometimes inappropriate learned habits and behaviours, and also the hypothalamus, which regulates chemical responses in the body and mind. The primitive mind is always trying to protect us. So to give you an example of how that works, imagine later today you're out and about and you run into a polar bear. So straight away your anxiety is going to go up, the fear survival response will kick in, you'll lose intellectual control, and you'll move from the logical intellectual part of the brain to the primitive emotional part of the brain. Your heartbeat will increase, your stomach will start churning, you'll get hot and sweaty, and you'll be off like a shot. So in those kind of situations, that response is great, and that's what you want. But unfortunately, that same response can be triggered by other events in our day-to-day lives, such as receiving an unexpected bill, having an argument, or just feeling under additional pressure in some way. So if our anxiety goes up, we lose intellectual control and the primitive mind takes over. So this can be a gradual process caused by micro stresses in everyday life. But if the primitive mind thinks that we're in some sort of danger or there's an emergency or crisis, it will respond immediately. And anxiety, depression, or anger are the primitive responses that it will always use to try to protect us. So it's really important that we understand how this part of the mind works so that we can stop it from overreacting when it doesn't need to. So I'm going to give you an example now of how the reactions of anxiety, depression, and anger were helpful to our ancestors to protect them. And this would have been before we had evolved and developed the intellectual part of our mind so that we can assess situations in a more rational way. When our ancestors looked out of their cave and there was snow, ice, or danger all around, they couldn't go out to hunt. They would stay in their cave and go into hibernation mode. They would pull a bearskin over themselves and snuggle down, depressing their bodily functions to conserve energy until the situation had changed or the danger had subsided. We would recognise these reactions nowadays as part of the symptomology of depression. Life was very dangerous in those days, so when our ancestors did go out to hunt, they would have to be constantly vigilant, looking out for wild animals who could attack. They wouldn't be far from their panic button. If there was a rustle in the bushes, they'd be off like a shot, hot and sweaty, heart beating quickly, stomach churning. We would recognise these reactions as anxiety, or if extreme, a panic attack. To defend themselves if they were attacked or if they felt threatened, they would make themselves big, loud and strong to scare or fight off any attacker. This happens when anger takes over. The primitive mind is a negative mind. It will always see things from the worst possible perspective. It must for our self-preservation. For instance, if you had to run into that polar bear that I mentioned earlier, you wouldn't think, oh, it's okay, he's probably already eaten. No, you would think he's going to eat me and you'd be off. It's an obsessional mind. If the polar bear is close by, you would be reminded of it constantly and you would have to keep checking. It's a vigilant mind. If we think that there's danger all around, whether real or imagined, then it's sensible to stay on high alert. The primitive mind is not intellectual and it can't come up with new ideas. It always refers back to previous patterns of behaviour. So if what we did yesterday worked and we have survived, then we will do the same thing again. Let's have a look now at how anxiety is created and how we move from the intellectual part of the brain, where we feel in control and can make sensible decisions, to the primitive part where we can feel anxious, depressed, or angry. Anxiety is caused by negative thinking. It's not necessarily what's going on around us that makes us anxious, it's the way we think about what's going on around us. We know it's our thoughts because if it was reality, then everyone who is in a similar situation would be having similar problems. We know that's not true, so it must be our thought patterns that are causing us to feel this way. Every negative thought we have is converted into anxiety. Remember, the mind can't tell the difference between imagination and reality. So if we're negatively thinking about something, it's as if it's real and it's happening now. The mind can't tell if we're thinking about the past or the future, if it's a big problem or a little problem. It's a problem now and our anxiety will go up now. Imagine you have an important meeting to go to. Intellectually, you know that that meeting will go okay. They usually do. But you start thinking that things will go wrong, and you think about it 50 times. The actual meeting goes quite well, but in your mind, you have attended 51 meetings, and 50 of them have been awful. Every negative thought we have is accumulated and stored. We say it's stored in a stress bucket. This is the hippocampus in the emotional primitive part of the brain. Luckily, we do have a natural way of emptying our bucket, and this is great because the emptier our stress bucket, the better we're able to cope with day-to-day life. So this process happens while we sleep. It's a special part of the sleep cycle known as rapid eye movement or REM sleep. So while we sleep, whilst dreaming, we process the events of the day and they're changed from an emotional memory to a narrative memory. They're moved from the primitive part of the brain to the intellectual part of the brain. And with the emotion taken away from them, we have more intellectual control. So it's great to wake up in the morning with an empty stress bucket, ready to start the day without any anxiety, depression, or anger. But that doesn't always happen. So let's have a look at why that is. So sometimes people's thoughts of day-to-day events can build up so much that this stress bucket will overflow. And unfortunately, REM sleep is restricted to only about 20% of our overall sleep pattern. And when we're trying to overdo it, then the mind will wake us up. And when it's the mind waking us up, we will be wide awake, possibly not feeling too great, mind might be racing, and we might find it hard to get back to sleep. And even if we do get back to sleep, we won't have emptied our stress bucket. So for other people, the opposite can happen and they're encouraged to sleep more. But because REM sleep uses up a great deal of energy to diffuse the anxiety, they will wake up feeling exhausted. And then we're in a grip of a vicious circle, waking up with stress still in the bucket. We're encouraged to be negative and we'll be working more from the primitive part of the brain. In order to get back that intellectual control and get on top of things, the first thing that we need to do is restrict the amount of stress that's filling up the stress bucket. And we can do this by starting to focus on the positive things in life. This is something that I focus on in my sessions with clients. We also need to prioritise sleep and get sleep patterns working more efficiently too. I do have a relaxation MP3 recording that can also help with this. Another important thing to consider is the physiology of what's happening chemically in the brain when we suffer from anxiety disorders and depression. We need a steady flow of all the feel-good motivational chemicals such as serotonin in order to stay mentally healthy. The best way to help us to do this is something we call the 3 Ps. And the 3 Ps are positive actions, positive interactions, and positive thoughts. We'll start with positive actions. This is doing something you enjoy, going for a walk, being in nature. Exercise is amazing for your mental health. It might be a hobby that you enjoy. You can even start by focusing on the positive things that you're already doing, but being intentional and really noticing how good they make you feel. Then we have positive interactions. This is connecting with friends and family in a positive way. Having meaningful interactions that leave you feeling good. Connection is so important for us humans. Even going back to our ancestors, we are sociable creatures. We work better in a tribe, caring for others, working together, having fun and enjoying family time. And then there's positive thoughts. Gratitude is a really great place to start to help you feel more positive. Thinking of all the things that you're grateful for each night before you go to bed. I also encourage my clients to think of all the good things that have happened each day and to positively predict how well things might go tomorrow instead of negatively forecasting what might go wrong. Some people like positive affirmations to encourage a positive mindset, and it's also really important to have positive self-talk. Be kind to yourself. Talk to yourself the way that you would talk to a friend. And when we do this, our brain will start to look for and find the positives in life instead of the negative. And in turn, this stops our stress bucket from filling up so quickly. When we consistently do this, we will be feeling mentally healthy and produce a constant flow of the feel-good motivational chemicals. It enables us to be happy, brave, motivated, and we can cope so much better with whatever we have to deal with. We're working from the intellectual mind. We'll find it easier to reach our goals, stop unhelpful habits, to build helpful, healthier habits, and also to overcome any fears and insecurities. We also know that when we're feeling down, we produce less of the feel-good motivational chemicals, sometimes significantly less. When we're feeling stressed or anxious, or even when we're very busy, we can produce an overload of adrenaline and cortisol, the stress hormones. Great for when we run into polar bears, but not so good for running our daily lives. So we need to regain intellectual control to deal with what we need to deal with. And this is something that hypnotherapy sessions can really help with. If you'd like any more information about how this relates to you and how hypnotherapy can help you, then please contact me to arrange an appointment or to have a chat.